Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the cool fog of San Francisco Bay during the early 1950s, the city carried on as if nothing unusual had disturbed its daily rhythm. Families strolled along the waterfront, the clanging of cable cars echoed through the hills, and the scent of sea salt and fresh bread drifted across neighborhoods. Yet, unknown to the citizens who breathed in the mist rolling off the Pacific, their city had become the stage for one of the most startling and secretive biological experiments ever conducted on American soil. It was not an attack launched by an enemy nation, nor a terrorist group lurking in the shadows. Rather, the attack came from their own government, hidden under the banner of national security during the height of the Cold War. This forgotten story, largely buried for decades and only uncovered through declassified files and congressional testimony, reminds us of the lengths to which powerful nations will go when paranoia, secrecy, and science collide. The events that unfolded in San Francisco in 1950 reveal the deeply unsettling reality that the line between defense and offense, experiment and violation, was blurred in ways the public never imagined. What happened was not merely a test. It was, in every sense, a biological attack carried out against unsuspecting American civilians, cloaked in silence, and only exposed many years later. To understand the motives behind this act, we must step back into the world of the 1940s and 1950s, a world living in the shadow of nuclear bombs, ideological battles, and an emerging fear that germs could be just as deadly as bombs. The Second World War had introduced humanity to horrors of unprecedented scale. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki revealed the devastating reach of nuclear weapons, but another equally chilling frontier was quietly opening. Japan's infamous Unit 731 had experimented with germ warfare in China, unleashing plagues and deadly pathogens with ruthless efficiency. Reports of these atrocities, paired with the growing tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, left American military planners convinced that biological warfare might be the next battlefield. By 1949, the U.S. military had established a new division under the Army's Chemical Corps, specifically tasked with studying and developing biological weapons. Fort Detrick, Maryland, became the nerve center of these operations. Officially, the program was framed as defensive, understanding how germs might be weaponized by an enemy so the U.S. could defend itself. But defense requires testing, and testing requires real-world conditions. This created a dilemma. How does one test germ warfare without risking lives? The solution the military embraced was both shocking and ethically indefensible. They would test it on their own people, without their knowledge. The city of San Francisco became the most infamous site of these experiments. Chosen for its dense population, consistent fog, and unique geography, San Francisco was seen as the perfect laboratory to model how biological agents might spread in an urban environment. In September of 1950, under an operation later revealed as Sea Spray, the U.S. Navy mounted a covert mission in which warships sailed just offshore, loaded not with artillery, but with tanks of bacteria. Over the course of days, these ships sprayed a cloud of microbes into the fog that blanketed the Bay Area, allowing nature to carry the germs inland, across streets, neighborhoods, and into the lungs of an unsuspecting public. The bacteria released were believed by the military to be harmless. Serratia marcescens, a red pigmented bacterium, was selected in part because it was easy to track due to its striking coloration when cultured in labs. Alongside it, the military also dispersed Bacillus globigii, now known as Bacillus subtilis var. Niger, another organism considered non-pathogenic. To the scientists and military brass orchestrating the plan, these microbes were supposed to represent a safe stand-in for more dangerous agents like anthrax or plague. The purpose was to test how an airborne biological weapon would disperse through a major American city, how far it would travel, how many people might be exposed under realistic conditions. For the residents of San Francisco, the event was invisible. They woke up to their usual fog, went to work, breathed the mist-filled air, and carried on with their lives, never suspecting that they were the subjects of a massive biological experiment. It was not until decades later through declassified documents and a scandal that reached Congress, that the truth came to light. The results of the test were staggering. According to military reports, nearly the entire population of San Francisco, some 800,000 people at the time, was exposed to the bacteria. Samples collected around the city showed widespread dispersal, proving that under the right conditions, a biological agent released offshore could infect a vast urban population with ease. For military strategists, it was a chilling confirmation that their theories were correct. For the civilians unknowingly exposed, it was an invisible violation that carried consequences far beyond what planners intended. Shortly after the experiment, something unusual happened that began to unravel the military's assurances that serratia was harmless. In October 1950, just weeks after the spraying, a man named Edward Nevin checked into a San Francisco hospital with a rare and deadly infection. Nevin, a 75-year-old man recovering from prostate surgery, developed a serratia marcescens infection that spread to his heart valves, causing a fatal case of septicemia. At the same hospital, Stanford University Medical Center, 10 other patients were found to be infected with serratia, a bacterium rarely seen in hospitals before. While the military denied any connection, many doctors suspected the sudden outbreak was linked to the Navy's experiment. For Nevin's family, the question of accountability lingered for decades, eventually leading to a lawsuit against the U.S. government in the 1970s. Though the case was dismissed, largely because the government maintained sovereign immunity and insisted no conclusive proof existed, the trial exposed the shocking reality of America's biological testing program. San Francisco was not alone. Across the 1950s and 1960s, the U.S. military carried out at least 239 open-air tests of biological and chemical agents in American cities, subways, and even schools. Washington, D.C., New York City, Minneapolis, and St. Louis all became unwitting laboratories. Some tests involved zinc-cadmium sulfide, a chemical later found to be potentially carcinogenic. Others released bacteria in subway systems to track how quickly microbes would spread underground. The American public, in effect, became human test subjects in a program they were never told about and never consented to. The secrecy of these experiments raises profound ethical questions that resonate to this day. At the time, the military justified the tests by claiming that the need for national security outweighed individual rights. The Cold War was a time of paranoia, when the threat of Soviet biological or chemical attacks seemed plausible, and planners argued that it was essential to understand how to defend against such threats. Yet, in doing so, they violated one of the most basic principles of medicine and science, informed consent. To expose entire populations to unknown risks without their knowledge was, by any measure, a breach of both ethics and trust. What makes the San Francisco test particularly disturbing is that the consequences may have extended far beyond the immediate infections observed in 1950. Serratia marcescens, once thought to be benign, is now recognized as an opportunistic pathogen capable of causing serious infections in vulnerable populations. Cases of pneumonia, urinary tract infections, and septicemia have been documented, especially among hospital patients. It is impossible to know how many illnesses or deaths in San Francisco during the years following the test might be linked to the experiment. The very uncertainty created by secrecy means that victims will never truly be counted. In the broader history of warfare and science, the San Francisco test stands as a stark example of the dangers of unchecked military power and the misuse of scientific research. It illustrates how fear can justify actions that, in hindsight, seem reckless and immoral. It also highlights the fragility of public trust in institutions. When citizens learned decades later that their own government had conducted biological attacks on them without their knowledge, the sense of betrayal was profound. This event eventually contributed to reforms in how the U.S. military and government conduct experiments on human subjects. Revelations of unethical research, from a Tuskegee syphilis study to CIA mind control programs under MKUltra, created public outrage that led to stronger oversight and the establishment of ethical standards such as the Belmont Report and the requirement for institutional review boards. Yet the shadow of San Francisco's fog test lingers, a reminder that vigilance is always necessary when secrecy and science intertwine. Today, the story of the biological attack on San Francisco is not widely remembered, but it deserves a central place in the history of the Cold War. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths that in their pursuit of security, governments may violate the very people they claim to protect, that scientific progress without ethical boundaries can become a weapon, and that history often hides its darkest chapters in plain sight, waiting for the fog to lift. In San Francisco, the fog still rolls in off the Pacific each morning, softening the city's edges and cloaking it in mystery. To the millions who walk its streets today, the mist is a symbol of beauty and romance. Yet hidden within its folds is the memory of a time when that fog carried more than just water vapor. It carried a secret, silent weapon, unleashed not by an enemy, but by a government willing to gamble with its people's lives in the name of defense.